Welcome to Hospitality Internships, the premier global talent network.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to our third installment of Learners2Leaders webinar. I am Dr. Tom Pedron, and I will be moderating this session today. We'll be covering effective communication, breaking barriers, and amplifying understanding. And today I'm joined by three of my illustrious colleagues here. First, Dr. Miranda Kittling-Lynch, Associate Professor in the Chaplin School of Hospitality and Tourism Management at Florida International University. We have Dr. Elizabeth Whalen, Assistant Professor and Program Coordinator, Tourism and Hospitality Management at Middle Tennessee State University. And then finally, last but certainly not least, Dr. Ethan Cheng, Assistant Professor of Hospitality and Tourism Management at Western Carolina University. Welcome all of you today. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having us.
So, as we begin, and we're on Friday, right? This is being taped on Friday, but we're going into our wonderful weekend as we celebrate here in the United States for Memorial Day weekend. When we are distilling effective communication down to its most fundamental element, what would that be and why? So, Elizabeth, what say you?
I think the number one thing in communication is more listening than actually talking, truly understanding what's not being said as much as what is being said, really getting to the core of the needs of the person you're communicating with, and really trying to understand whether that's the body language, it's their facial expressions, it's the words they're using, it's the tone they're using, taking all those into consideration, saying, what is it that they're really getting at in the center of it?
Miranda, what say you?
Yeah, I have two things. I think one would be to know your audience, because depending on your audience, you may want to approach your communication style differently, right? I also think that you need to say things in a way that can be most quickly and easily consumed. So for example, everybody looking at this question on the screen, I've got a terminal degree, and even I'm just like, okay, what is this really asking me? So especially in today's world where people are very fast paced, they want to be able to consume information as quickly and easily as possible. I think you just have to say things as clearly and plainly as you can.
Perfect. And Dr. Cheng?
Yeah, I totally agree. Yeah, two professors, their suggestions, and I do also think about as an international worker. I think cultural understanding and differences are important in our hospitality industry. When I work in the hotel industry, I have several employees. They are from American. Others speak Spanish. Some speak different kinds of language. They have different customs and religions, and trying to help each other to have a better teamwork. So I would say, as a leader, we usually try to figure out how we can communicate easily and efficiently with other people with different backgrounds. Example is like some people really like face-to-face communication. Some will like written. Some even like virtual using social media is better than just face-to-face to speak. So as a leader or manager, usually we should provide different kinds of channels of communication and help to have a better performance and efficiency of communication.
Thank you. And we also think about this too. A lot of times it's almost what we don't say. What I like to think about, it's almost like in music when you have those breaks and you have the pauses. It's in between those words and those sentences and what they're talking about is really where the heart of the matter of the communication is coming. And what Elizabeth talked about a little bit earlier, that body language. You're so much reading this as opposed to what's coming out of their mouth at the same time when it really comes down to looking at communication. And essentially, when we're thinking about dealing with the vast amount of different nationalities that we deal with, the internationalism of all of our communication needs to be so synchronous at this time. And we're worried about trying to say the right things or not saying the wrong things. And that's really part of what our communication and the challenge of that, which always will be, it always was, and it always will be. So how has your communication strategy evolved over the years to overcome challenges and enhance clarity for yourself? Elizabeth.
So I think one of the things I think back to is when I was in the restaurant, when I was in the hotel and managing for that, there was a lot, and I was very young when I did that. I was managing people who were a lot older than I was. I was dealing with customers who were a lot more experienced than I was, and trying to really understand their needs in a way that I could still protect the organization, protect my employees, but also get to the needs of what the guests were, get to the needs of what my employees were in a way that everyone left feeling like they had accomplished something, that they had won the negotiation. And I think that's one of the skills that you learn over time, is that negotiation is about making sure that everyone, when they leave the table, feels like they actually got what they wanted from it. And that honestly takes practice. It takes skill. It takes time. You don't always get it right the first time. As a teacher, as a faculty member, I had to learn that with students, because it was a whole different conversation than when I was in the restaurant or the hotel. And sometimes it means taking a step back and not responding right away, being more contemplative. You have a guest at a table at a restaurant who's very angry because they said they ordered something different than what came out. And you know that what they ordered was correct. And on the menu, it said exactly what they were getting, and they read it differently. It's to take that and say, well, what is really going on in the heart of it? We don't know what's going on at home. We don't know what issues they're going through. We don't know what struggles they went through today. And it feels like just something else weighing on top of them, and they're supposed to be enjoying this moment. And so to take it from that perspective and say, what can I do to help you enjoy this moment, but still make sure I'm protecting my employee, and that they're not feeling like I did everything I was supposed to do, and now I'm the one who's in trouble. And you never want that either. And so you're kind of that intermediary in that. So over the years, I've really learned to be more patient. I tend to want to act really quickly. I make very fast decisions. And so just taking that extra couple of minutes, sometimes if you only have minutes, like in a restaurant setting, to sometimes a day or two if you're in a much more relaxed environment, to really make that end decision.
And Elizabeth, we think about our industry and all the facets and sectors of our industry, and how restaurants and hotels are just two parts of it, and how interacting with those guests aren't, and you can have even the same guest, and they can be going to a different part of it in the tourism aspect, and all of a sudden it can be a different way of talking to them because they're in a different environment, right?
100%.
Different people around them, the air is different, the water is different, so many different things that are a part of that. And as we talk about the customer journey at the same time, we should all probably be communication majors, right?
Yes.
And it sounds like that as well too. And you wonder why hospitality involves all sectors of business, because we have to be communication majors at the same time as too.
I think that's one of the, I'm going to just kind of follow up. I think that's one of the challenges and joys of being in this industry, is that our days are not the same. Even if the task and the functions look the same, because the people, even the same people, are different day by day. That, to me, that's the fun part of it, is what's the new challenge I'm going to face today? How's this person going to interact with this environment, with what's going on around them?
Thank you for that. Miranda.
Yeah, I was just reflecting back to my time in industry. I worked mostly in the full service restaurant industry. And yeah, high pressure environments and communication in high pressure environments. More times than not, I remember exchanging communication that would not be appropriate, say in the classroom or in other settings. And I think in terms of how my strategy has evolved, would be the importance of circling back, because in the moment, in a high pressure moment with your coworkers, with your boss, the people you're managing, someone's going to say the wrong thing. Someone's going to hurt feelings. It's going to happen. I think that there is huge value though in circling back after, and either being able to say, I'm sorry, or next time, let's do this. Right.
And I think, Miranda, you bring up a good point. Reflection. Right? When we have to do that full circle moment of going, okay, we get to take a breath now. What just happened? Because our world, as you both pointed out, is constant. We're having to make quick decisions, or we got to move on. We don't have 20 minutes to go, well, let me think about it. We've got to do it now. That reflection helps us to go, oh, I probably should have handled that differently. And as we all grow with age, we learn to go, well, maybe I probably should have handled that a little bit differently. And I can tell you, as a former chef and an event director, I can tell you how many times that's happened to me. And it's still, to this day, I still psychoanalyze myself when it comes to that communication, because it's so much reflecting, going, okay, next time let's do this. And it's always this process of improvement. So thank you for that. Dr. Chang.
Yeah, I think when I work at a hotel, one thing I realized is we sometimes assume everyone knows everything the same way, but actually people have a different interpretation, perception of the things when they heard from the manager. So I think listening, speaking skills are both important, and that people speak, your employees speak, and also do some one-to-one besides the regular meetings. It will help you to understand more about your employees' needs. Besides customer needs, you also need to take care of your employees as well. and again, talk to face-to-face and virtual channels or kind of different, and send to the first question, body language, eye contact. People have different background, have different kind of their body language when they listen to the manager supervisor talk. So, and when people speak, you have different voices. So you may have to negotiate or to talk about with different groups and try to figure out the best way to communicate with your colleagues. And especially in the hospital setting, it's noises and different language barriers. So I would say that's what I learned when I work at a hotel. I use different ways, even use some technology to help our communication. So like in a higher education, we use different like teams. We use different kind of project management software. I believe those works in our higher education, but in hospital industry, we do have something that we have to use besides oral written. By using some technology, I think it's good for communication, especially young generations like tech savvy.
Right. Well, and we also think about too, and an adage that I like to use is it's not what you say, it's how you say it.
Mm-hmm.
And another one that I always am very pertinent on using is perception is reality. The way they heard it is the way they heard it. The way they read it is the way they read it. It may have got that lost in translation, but it's not what you say, it's how you say this. So we have to be mindful in our communication and the strategies that we use with different customers, different guests, clients, students, parents, no matter how we're looking at that, that communication is so very important in that.
Yeah, so I also want to highlight again the emotions. Sometimes when we speak, like the tone of voice and also your facial expression when you talk with your colleagues and supervisor, sometimes those facial expression, emotion actually affect a lot of your speaking because people, when they saw your face and then, they kind of just lost their direction and, just feel sad, upset, and, emotion labor. We are all in a high stressful hospital environment. So I would say the importance of emotion should be aware for as a manager when you speak to your employees.
Let's consider that too, that we've all been on the family square here and in department meetings, right? The faculty meetings, and somebody says something or a new initiative comes down that you're going, wait a minute, and your face cannot hide it. I know that I am completely hands up guilty. People read my face and they go, and I'll get a text message saying, I don't think you like that one. So, I'm enjoying it. So your face didn't say that. So I'm so guilty of that. I'm an expressionist. I can't help that part. So when we think about how we approach, managing heightened customer expectations, and we live in a world that those heightened expectations are getting more and more by the day because everything's a little bit easier, right? How has your approach evolved over your career to improve customer satisfaction for those that you've worked with, those that you work with as well too, including your students? Elizabeth.
I think it's one of those things where the customer is both more knowledgeable and less knowledgeable. I think they're more knowledgeable, or at least they think they are, because they communicate through these social media channels, through going and looking up information online. It floors me sometimes how inaccurate the information that they have is, but they believe is accurate. Especially if you're looking at companies that maybe change policies more frequently, where that maybe was a policy at some point and it isn't anymore. But it's always about keeping the dignity of the people you're communicating with, that whether or not they have the false information, it's not necessarily that you need to correct them. The whole kind of joke of, none of that actually matters, right? The truth is you want to maintain dignity and communication across the parties, that you're listening, you're aware, you see that maybe they had misinformation, and it's about correcting it in a way that they really can accept. So I remember there was a case study that came out about Starbucks probably 10, 15 years ago now, where they would correct people's orders to use their language for, rather than a small, it was a tall, rather than a medium, it was a grande, and so forth. And so every time they ordered, they didn't say, oh, no, you want the tall. Instead, when they were repeating the order back to, they said, you ordered a tall, blah, blah, blah. And they would have a display that had the correct information. So things that they found that people often had incorrect or needed to learn for their operation, they managed in these small ways that let people maintain their dignity. And I think that is true in any kind of communication you have, that you assume the best of the person is in front of you, whether they're emotional in that state or going through something else, that you always have the best intentions in mind. And they do too, even if they don't realize their communication maybe isn't as positive. And you have to stay positive as the professional. So that's true whether I'm talking to my students, that's true whether I'm talking to guests or even your employees that you're communicating with. It's just, I think dignity is a key aspect of all of that.
Elizabeth, you brought up something too, just jarred me, talking about AI this morning on a different call. We've been hallucinating for years, right? AI just doesn't hallucinate. We've been hallucinating for years. And the important part about that is just realizing going, none of this is perfect. None of it ever will be perfect, but it's figuring out a different way and a different strategy at the same time to make sure that we're connecting on those levels that we should be, because they're expecting us to be a little bit more human-centered. But at the same time, it's a paradox, isn't it? We have this lovely thing called a cell phone. Everybody's stuck on it. They're not worried about everybody else. People are sitting at tables and everyone's got their cell phone out. They're not even talking at the same time, but you're wondering going, wait a minute, you're all spending a lot of money to be here, but what's going on here? So, but they're also expecting your service to be top notch, expecting everything there to be at the same time. So it's quite the paradox of our world, and where it really is. I mean, I always talk about service being that moving target for us, because we're never going to get everybody. We've tried for eons. It will never happen. Miranda, what say you?
I was just thinking two things. One, way that my communication has evolved with my students now, right, would be I try to use thank you in all of my communication, whether it be thank you for the question, thank you for reaching out, thank you for letting me know, thank you for touching base. But you could apply that to guest service as well, right? Thank you for bringing this to my attention. Thank you for whatever. I think that really goes a long way, and it sets a more positive tone for the conversation as a whole, right? People like being thanked. And the other thing would be probably the sense of urgency that people feel need to be in responses. I don't know that this is something that I want to embrace, but it's something that I acknowledge as being a demand, both from our guests and our coworkers, our superiors, our students, whatever it is. There seems to be a real expectation of immediate reply.
We are in that time and era forevermore, right? Because everything's so instant. We can find out what the temperature is. We can find out what the weather is. We know what's happening down the street. We got to know right now. And if we don't, they're going to move on to something else. And that's really what we're charged with. Dr. Cheng, what say you?
Yeah, so in terms of customer expectation, complaint, satisfaction, I would like to use, I call it 3 C's. So like concise, clear, courteous. That's what I use when I serve and when I work with no matter students or customers. I think it's worse for all different kinds of people. And then show your empathy. I think this one thing. Learn to just listen. I mean, sometimes they just want to talk and want to listen and what they try to talk about. And then try to think from their sides. When you need to say apology, just say it. And then besides using some, coupons, free upgrade, but just show how you care about the business, the value of your business, and the satisfaction. And one thing I want to talk about is the difference between hospitality and service. We can always provide a great service, but how you make someone feel wow, that will be the very unique hospitality experience that it may increase satisfaction and even the loyalty and trust. So build relationship with the customers, doing some survey interview, have your customer database, those are what we usually do. And also happy employees, happy customers. So make sure you bring those stuff to your employees during training, orientation, meeting. And then I would say when they have a customer expectation, you also have to set your employee expectations. So employees should know about the value, mission, those kind of cultural stuff, so they can definitely meet the goal of the company they want to.
And you bring up a word, and it's also was in the question as well too, is satisfaction. Because satisfaction is not correlated to loyalty. Right? You can be satisfied, but still not wanting to come back. We think about that internally with our internal customers being our employees, but we also think it externally when we're thinking about customer expectations going, you met my expectations and I was satisfied, but that doesn't mean I'm coming back. Mm-hmm. And to be able to take that and turn that into making sure that it's a positive is very much a challenge that we've had for many years, but we're hyper-focusing on it now because why? Well, technology. Technology has changed all of this. When we think about communication, how that so much is part of what we're always going to be about now, and how AI will change all those venues that we move into as we go down the line. And all of us, I mean, even beyond our time, what it will be like in 20 years. So how have you adapted your written and social communication skills to better connect with guests and colleagues?
So I think this goes back to what Miranda was saying with saying thank you. Email etiquette has drastically changed. And I know that early on in my teaching, students would say that my version of communicating via email, which tends to be very direct, was in contrast with when they met me personally and I was very personable. And so I really had to learn how to communicate differently, especially as the students, and I'm going to use students in this case. I've been in academia for a while. Students change, our customers change, generational preferences have changed. Because there's so much negativity in online communication, there are now these methods we have to use to soften the way we're saying something, even if we're saying the same thing, whether it's being direct or something else. So I know there are memes making fun of how often we use exclamation marks, but I use exclamation marks to show that I'm not angry, that this is a positive, like, here, I'm just giving you some information. I'll use, the little face, I forget what they're called, the emoticons. I do say thank you quite a bit. Thank you so much for bringing that to my attention is one of the huge ones. Like, whether or not I already knew it, just letting them know I'm listening, I'm hearing you. That communication with someone else, whether it's through text, social media, email communication, which we do also with our guests as well, responding to TripAdvisor reports. Someone put on a negative TripAdvisor report, and you can go and you can read where the company was very defensive. The manager was very defensive of what the guest had to say. And whether or not the guest is right or wrong, it's all the other people reading it that are really taking away the interpretation. So you're communicating with more than just this individual, you're communicating with everyone. And so it's always keeping in mind who the audience is and what the audience needs from that moment. And I had a couple of times where I really learned that I was trying to teach through an email, like, this is what you should have done. Not realizing that there were other things that the student maybe didn't communicate, and that's not what they needed in that moment. They just needed me to hear them, to listen to them, and to problem solve for another solution. I think guests are the same way. A lot of times they don't need me to educate them about what they could have done better to have a better experience. Instead, what they need me to do is to listen, to empathize, as Ethan has talked about empathizing, and just really say, okay, this happened. How do we make it better, either for next time or even right now?
And you brought up a good point earlier, talking about room for interpretation. What did you say just that mean? Because I'm interpreting it this way. We could also talk about what Dr. Cheng brought up earlier, cultural differences. I didn't mean that. And I've lived and taught around the world as well too, and traveled everywhere. And I know that I've seen these cultural differences in communication be completely off. Someone was happy, but their face showed it a different way, but what they were saying was positive. But that changes everything. So that room for interpretation is really scary, because it can be real small or it can be real big, depending on the context of where you are, who you're speaking with, their emotions, where they are, what's happening, what they've been through. Have they been on a plane for the last 14 hours and it got delayed for 12 and they're here and they're a day late for their cruise? I mean, there's so many things that can happen in the context of that. Miranda, what say you?
Yeah, I agree with a lot of what Elizabeth is saying, especially in terms of written communication, emails, for example. People really can't tell your tone in an email unless you set the tone in your email. I was definitely guilty early in my career of making it very to the point, direct. Let's just skip the pleasantries. Let's skip the, what's the word for the salutation? Because I don't have time for that. But in reality, if I don't make the time for it, it's not going to be received in the way that I mean for it to be received. So I think that, and I think also accepting the fact that people are going to come to you the way that they come to you. They're going to communicate to you the way that they communicate. And you can either receive it, move on, or you can, like Elizabeth said, try to teach them. And that's not really what we're in the business of.
Right, right. And that becomes almost, when we've come from industry, We've seen that, and Miranda, let me just tell you how I relate to that completely, because as a chef, it's next event, next plate, next thing that's going on, the next wedding. We got to keep moving. There's like, hi, how you doing? Like, no, we don't have time for that. Yes, no, maybe, okay, move on. And so that part creates that quickness of it, right? That brevity of us. But at the same time, that brevity communicates going, wait a minute, I really didn't mean that, but I'm just trying to keep, you're almost military a little bit in certain ways. And I'm so guilty of that at the same time as well too, because I know where I came from and my culture at the same time, but also how I was trained and raised at the same time too. So Dr. Cheng, what say you?
Yeah, I agree with those of the professors, what they say. I really think social media engagements are kind of very important nowadays. The impact social media are huge. For example, we have event planning class when student plan an event and they send out the flyers, emails, but later on, actually, students, they got those information not from emails or flyers, but they got those information from social media. So we make some posts, even have a promotional short video on TikTok and Instagram. They saw it, so they knew it, and they joined the event. So it's kind of a different nowadays. We have to use different channels to reach out to our audience and attendees. So I would say social media, promotion video, those are important, and it's also a way you can communicate with your the audience online, right? So they share the comments, they reply to their comments, and actually build another relationship starting from the social media. So online review, social media channels, those share comment likes are important to communicate nowadays, and that's why in higher education, we can see a lot of school now we have their own different kinds of the social media channels to promote programs, to reach out to high school students or college students, because they use those to communicate.
When we think about, the omni-channel, right? Omni-channel of every single thing that we do now. We have to be able to communicate in so many different ways and almost know different types of the same language in different ways, because we're speaking to different people. When we're talking with parents, we speak differently with them than we do with students, than we do with an advisor, than we do with another professor, or maybe our dean. And so that omni-channel approach to our communication, let alone using the internet, using different social media strategies, we have to know all those different things as well too. So here we're wearing more, as Elizabeth brought up earlier in the beginning, we talk about all these different hats that we wear. Here's another hat that we're wearing at the same time. So pitfalls. Okay. So what are some of those communication pitfalls you initially faced in your career? This is going to be good, because you know that we're going to all have to throw ourselves under the bus here. So Elizabeth, you start first.
Yes. Okay. So I think it comes back to your personal brand of being aware that everything you communicate will always come with you. It's your reputation. It's who you are. So it's the way you dress. It's the way you make eye contact. It's the way you walk into a room. It's the way you shake someone's hand. It's not just the words you say. It's not just the words you write. It's everything about you. And early in my career, when I was at the restaurant, the business clothes was, we had to wear a button up and we had to do that kind of stuff. Sure, fine. When I moved into the hotel, they wanted something a little more professional. And I was very resistant to that. I was like, I have my clothes. I'm good. I don't make that much money. I didn't invest in myself and buying something nicer. And I remember on my very first year review that my boss made a comment about my appearance, about my clothes, about what I was wearing. And my first reaction was to take offense to it. I have a male boss, and I'm his female manager. And then I really took time to reflect, and I realized, what, he's probably right. I'm not presenting myself in the best way I can to continue to represent the organization, but also me as a person, as a brand. What image was I putting forth and communicating to others that I was ready to move forward, that I was ready to take on more responsibility? Yes, I was doing really well at my job, but what message was I communicating with the guest who was walking in the door? And so I went out and I spent money, some real money, to buy more blazers, more jackets, more professional wear, and to make sure that that was always going to the dry cleaners and it was always professionally pressed. And so when I walked into a room, everyone knew I was the manager, and they, especially being young, as a young manager, and I was in my early 20s, and like I said, I was the youngest one in the room. People didn't know I was the manager. They assumed I wasn't. So when I changed my appearance, people made different assumptions about me and they interacted with me differently. And it led to future possibilities for me of moving up within the organization and people taking me more seriously.
We could take that bite out of this video and send that to every single hospitality student that exists today and before and in the future. It is so essential. I can't stress it to you. And again, Elizabeth, I'm not sure if we're the same age or not, but I'm a little old fashioned, but I am from old school. And it's one of those things that I preach about so much, is that your communication isn't about what you're saying, it's everything else. And
Right.
the first thing when you walk in the room, they don't hear you, they see you. And what are they seeing? That's what you're communicating.
And
Miranda, what say you?
really quickly, I did want to add to that. So if you are worried about spending money, both at the institution I'm at now, Middle Tennessee, and I was at the University of Houston before this, we had free business professional clothes that were donated to us that we give to students. So if you are a student and you're not sure, I'm sure even if you weren't a student and you're like, I just need help with interviews, can I come look at your closet? I don't know, we would turn anyone away. So there are opportunities to get clothes without spending a lot of money to put your best foot forward. So I just wanted to put that plug in there too.
And to add to your point, J.C. Penney, I know Macy's does it. I forget all the different ones that we have here where I'm in California. And we have all these coming up to saying, hey, do your students need anything? And they bring in and do a whole fashion show for them, and not $500 suits. We're talking $100 suit as to going, you can afford this, and things that they've donated at the same time as well too. So it's a little problem circumstance for them. It's a little bit of advertising and marketing, but at the same time, it gives the students a little bit more approachability to these businesses where they're going, I can't afford stuff in those stores. I have to go to a Goodwill. I have to go somewhere else at the same time. So thank you for bringing that up. Miranda, what say you?
Yeah, I also agree with and I hate it because I don't want to say that appearance is important, but it truly is, especially in a service-oriented industry, right? Early in my career, I was working long and late shifts, doubles, just really burning all ends of the candle. And I just simply did not have time to go and get my nails done. And my boss pulled me aside and said, hey, I can't have you serving customers with, this unmanicured. And this is like 20 something years later, I am religious about having my nails appropriately presented, which is, just a small piece of it that says a lot, right? My other point would be on written communication. I have learned not to send written communication with emotion. So if I am angry, upset, frustrated, etc., I let it sit for a day. And I know that contradicts the immediacy of replies that we're seeing demanded right now, but I think that it's really, really important to kind of sleep on it.
We think about how many emails that we have in our saved box or draft that we have not sent, that
Thank
we're
goodness.
going, at some point I want to shoot this and just hit send. I have too many of those to count. Again, being honest and open about it at the same time. Ethan, what say you?
Yeah, so from my work experience in the lodge industry, I learned that when you talk with your coworkers or employees, people should start, oh, you have to do this, and then, right, those are the things that should be done today. But I learned from my previous, like a GN I work with, that start with some informal conversation, relax, informal, but you just ask, how are you today? How is your family? If the employees are from foreign country, you say, oh, I watch the news about home country. How is your family okay over there? Something like those informal conversations actually has a huge positive impact on employee, their morale, their trust and retention rates. So I do think that's important. And I also want to say we do a lot of hospitality to our customers, but why don't we do hospitality to our employees? So recognize their efforts and performance. When they have birthday, just bunch of flowers, chocolate, and just say happy birthday to them. I think those are very helpful and have a very positive impact on employees, their feelings and perception about the company. I also agree about a tone of voice. So when I talk with coworker supervisor, make sure that is like gentle, confident, and not like I'm not a boss, but I'm trying to coach, trying to mentor. I also work some company. They have some mentorship program in a company. So you have someone senior to guide you, to help you to be a better, leader in the future. And I do think those are important. Besides what your meetings, your different kinds of policies, and I think mentorship program is good to do it in the hospitality industry.
And Ethan, you actually bring up a really good point when we think about personalization, right? And I like to teach it as to, we are personalization of everything, but then we go personal, right? Everybody gets that same email. Oh, welcome to, we're looking forward to seeing you. But then when they walk in that room, because if we know by any organization that exists out there, and you may be a fan or you may not be a fan, Ritz-Carlton does this amazingly. You walk in and they know who you are, and it's the scariest thing possible because they're looking at you saying your name, even at the way it's supposed to be said. They know everything about you. And it's a little creepy, but at the same time, it's almost enlightening to go, wait a minute, this is actually possible. So when we think about, as I talked about earlier, a little bit about AI, that's going to be a game changer when it comes to us thinking about communication and knowing those cultural differences. When they walk into the room, we know who they might be, or we want a certain culture may walk into the room. We know that where they may be from and what may be happening. Maybe they're here celebrating a holiday from their country and not here at the same time. Kind of like us right now. We're going to be celebrating Memorial Day. Well, other countries don't celebrate that as well too, but we do certain things. We may be traveling for that internationally at the same time. So it really is an important thing to really think about when we're considering those pitfalls. Okay, here's the big one, and I love this one. So we got to start over. Okay, so starting over, what changes would you make to your communication approach to ensure better understanding and collaboration? Elizabeth?
So I don't think I would change anything, and here's the reason why. I wouldn't be the effective communicator I am today without the mistakes I have made along the way. Those little ones where I can remember back that one individual person I talked to and their reaction to something I said, and realizing the impact that I had, not maybe just on their day, but their whole week, or even sometimes longer than that, the way we communicate with someone in a very important moment, which we don't know when those moments are really that important to that person, we can't always know. But whether that's for positive or negative, that those little things we do along the way to teach us to kind of have our own style of communication, a way that fits our personality, because with all these tips, it has to still fit who you are as a person. And early on, I would try to mimic other people I really respected, but it wasn't me as a person. Humor is not, like, I'm not going to communicate in a very serious situation using humor. Where it works for some people, that's how they communicate effectively. And so really knowing who I am came through a lot of trial and error, a lot of making mistakes, fixing those mistakes, fine-tuning over time. And I still continue to make mistakes and learn from them and say, okay, how can I do this better? Reflecting back what Miranda said, like, who am I as a person? Who do I want to be? What legacy do I want to leave behind for this person? What kind of impact do I want to have on their day and their life? And how can I be better at doing that? And that's a personal goal of mine, but it's also a professional goal of mine.
This is on video now, Elizabeth, so everybody knows that we're going to be holding you to that. Miranda, what say you?
I agree with a lot of what Elizabeth said again. The only thing I would add is maybe I would go back in time and tell myself that not everything necessarily needs to be said, right? There are definitely things that simply don't need to be said. I would probably ask myself before communicating with others, what is the benefit? Is there a benefit, right? And if there's not, skip right over it.
Silence is power sometimes.
Yes.
Right? When we don't say something, when we really, really want to, we learn that over our time again, talking about what Ethan talked about earlier, about emotions, right? When those get the most of us, that starts to change everything. And all of a sudden we start getting personal and not talking about the actual situation. So it's important for us to really know that. And again, those of you who are watching, we're all throwing ourselves under the bus here for a reason, that the things that we've learned, the things that we might have wanted to change, but how we look at things now is part of our own reflection on our own personal life as professionals. So Ethan, what say you?
Yeah, so I would like to summarize about change I will make by using the 4 types of communication. So in terms of nonverbal, I would say the gesture, posture, eye contact, facial expressions. Those, I think, if I go back, I would do better. Especially the cultural differences when I work in the United States and Asia is kind of different. Visual communication. So some people, they don't like learning about from communicate by picture videos. You give them the papers, they don't read. But we show them some picture photos, videos. They would love to by using that way for visual communication, or even using some technology. Verbal. So listen and speak, clarity, the tone, word selection. I think is also a very good one. We should think about it, and speech rates. Right? And I think those are important to affect people what they perceive about your talk. Final written. Some people, when you talk, but sometimes forgot. So you have your records, you have papers, notes. That will help them to memorize, to make sure we're on the same direction. And then finally, I would suggest, if I'm going back, like follow up and follow through. Those are, I think, important besides when we plan to have a better communication, but follow through, follow up, everything, and then evaluate about what we did for the past communication, if any kind of errors or mistake we made, and then measure about, and then think about how we can plan for the next time if we got the same issue or similar issue, and have a better outcomes next time.
And keywords right there, next time. And we hope for a next time, right? Hope for next time with those customers, with our guests, with all those as well too. So last quick, this is be like the lightning round, but one quick question. Communication. What's your one piece of advice about communication? Elizabeth.
Don't stop trying to improve. Just keep working on it.
Miranda.
Elizabeth keeps stealing all the good answers. I think maybe say it to yourself in your mind first before you say it out loud.
Ethan.
I also think before you speak, and also don't worry about making mistakes, because we learn from that. We learn from those experiences and being kind of better hospital leader in the future, and then you can train your future talents in being a good mentor for your company.
I will sum it up with mine, and it's 3 words that I use, and I involve them in probably every single class that I've ever taught in the last 20 years. Is communication is based on how you look, how you act, and how you speak. When you look at those 3 areas, there are tree trunks to many different branches that focus off of that. But how you look, how you act, and how you speak. You're focusing on those 3 areas. Those will assist with your communication and developing yourself. And remember, it's a marathon, not a sprint. Us on this screen right now, we're still working on our communication. So please be aware of that no matter where they go. So at this point, we're almost done here. What I'd like to do is invite you to save the date for our next installment of the Learners to Leaders webinar series. It'll be the 4th one. And that will be on Friday, June 21st, same bat time, same bat channel here. Peak performance, strategies for building exceptional high-performing teams. I want to thank everybody, especially our illustrious panel today, for joining us. I appreciate your time. I hope you all have a wonderful weekend and a wonderful day. We'll see you next time. Thank you so much.
Welcome to Hospitality Internships, the premier global talent network.